The wacky world of MultimediaJay.
Mulligan, 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 mulligan. How's that for a confusing intro? Especially after the stuff that I was talking about late last week. So, 2015 intro, and then the Blue Skies theme from 2016. Don't worry, folks, I'm sorry if I confused any of you. It's still 2017. It's still the year of Semper Reformanda, but I'm just doing a Throwback Tuesday. Who said Throwback Thursday and Flashback Friday had to have all the fun? Plus, this might be the last video for a while because of garbage weather that we have coming through. Ice crap tonight, snowstorm Thursday. So let's make it a good one. Beginning with this mulligan on this whole controller situation here. Here it is, the controller that I was talking about earlier. My first Xbox One controller, even though I have basically no intention of buying an Xbox One. I don't see much of a point of buying an Xbox One. And I'm sure Microsoft doesn't mind either with the whole, hey, well, if you ever want an Xbox, you can get the games you have on PC that you bought through the Windows Store and vice versa. Yeah, that was actually a pretty cool idea. You know, I've usually been a fan of JRPGs, so I've tended to, lean a bit towards Sony on the console side of things, but Microsoft, man, they've totally done a 180 since the days when the Xbox One was supposed to be a disastrous DRM-crippled, console that looks like a Betamax player. I dare say the Xbox One is looking a bit more interesting nowadays than it did when it first came out. So here it is. This is the Power A wired Xbox One controller that should also be compatible with Windows. There should be a USB adapter on this thing, and it's heavier. This is the $30 one, and look, dual rumble motors. I didn't have to do anything with the internet for this because Walmart had this SKU as well, although the lady running the returns thing for the 360 thing from yesterday was in a bit of a bad mood, because I think she unfortunately had to train a bunch of folks who had no bleeping idea what they were doing. But yeah, dual rumble motors, impulse triggers. I don't even know what any of this is, but this is an officially licensed product, so I'm hoping there's at least build quality that's on par with this thing, even if it's not like this. So, just so, as I feel like using different controllers, swap them out. It's a PC. I mean, it's not like I'm going to have to spend $50 every couple of years on all new controllers when the old ones still work. Not like that not trying to rub that in too much with one of the shortcomings of the console world. By the way, if apparently some folks have versions of these F310s that have rumble in them, I'd love to know where those are, because there was an F510 that was the rumble version of this that's been discontinued. So now it's either wired, no rumble, or wireless with rumble. So Logitech has really kind of just made me never want to buy their stuff ever again, because, I'd much rather use a Bluetooth adapter with a DualShock controller at this point. And maybe that's why, this thing's been out for a couple of years now. The only real concentrated coolness in this controller is legacy support, because you can change from X input to direct input and back. But yes, this is an F310. It is way too light to have rumble, and I actually picked this up to replace the Logitech, the Rumble Pad, the old direct input only controller, when they started having games that were not compatible with this. But this does pretend it's a 360 controller, hence the color scheme and things like that. So it did work better in that respect. But no, Rumble, there's people that have modded these things to include Rumble. It does have some weight to it, but unfortunately that's not from motors. Okay, let's check this thing out, and let's compare it to the 360 controllers, which you have to get all Raiders of the Lost Walmart to find, although they are still out there, and you can still buy them new. I imagine the lack of popularity because, cord, is probably going to keep them that way for quite some time. I don't expect the prices to go flying through the roof anytime soon. Plus, it's a good PC controller, even if the D-pad is pretty floaty. I like this thing already, although it does share the same build quality as the 360 one. It has a bit more heft to it because it actually has rumble motors. So let's go over everything besides, of course, the fingerprint magnet in the middle, Xbox button, your 2 buttons here, and things like that. These sticks are rubber. These sticks are very rubbery, so good for the analog. It's got that D-pad that's better than the floaty thing on the 360 controller by leaps and bounds. These buttons do feel cheap, just like the ones on the 360 one did. So, let's do a 3-way comparison. F310, this thing, and a 360 controller. One thing at a time here. So, first order of business. On top, the bumper buttons are like that. They feel completely hollow on the F310. The trigger underneath, it has a little bit too much tension to it, and it doesn't feel like it has enough movement and stuff. Basically, because there's triggers on everything these days, Logitech tried their hand at it, and it kind of sort of doesn't work all that great. On the Xbox One thingy, clicky, 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 but the trigger has notably more play. The winner on the top buttons, of course, is the 360 controller. Again, more subdued, and the trigger might squeak after a bit, but it feels like it moves a bit more, and there's more options available for the analog side of it, like when you're playing driving games and things along those lines. Analogs, like a PlayStation, but a tad more slippery, and they press down, but at least it goes in a circle. The older Logitech controller actually had a square around the edge of their sticks. Analogs, rubbery. This thing definitely feels usable. Clicks down, although it makes a little bit of noise. Analogs on the 360 controller, the most plasticky of them all, but also quiet if you use them as a button. It does work because there is just enough grip to not slide off most of the time, but these things are going to be way better for in terms of being a controller and whatnot. D-pads, horrible, like they just yanked it off of a joystick for a flight stick or something like that. The worst. This one, the best. It's very close to a classic controller, and it's not way the heck off of its base. This thing, again, this was one of the worst things about the 360 controllers, but it's not as bad as this one. This one could actually glitch out and get stuck in an up position or something like that, and you'd push it one way and your character walks the other way diagonally. So, classic 4 buttons, holdover from the Super Nintendo era. Very solid, but the controller's hollow. Rather flimsy, but if they work, they work. Notably more solid, because this is the most solid controller out of all of them. But I still think these are a little bit better than these, as far as that stuff is concerned. Little button in the middle, these things as well. Those are solid. Xbox button, those aren't very good build quality. This is the best of them by far, because it's big and textured and stuff, and you have solid buttons there. Now, let's play some games here, and this time let's do a 3-way comparison, because these are all X-input compatible, at least if I put the switch in the right spot. 3-way comparison, Leo's Fortune, Riptide GP2, and maybe some other games as well. Let's lug, well there's already a 360 controller plugged into Monolith, so this one can stay here. These two can go on a field trip. Oh boy, camcorder Let's Play stuff. Why do I feel like I've done this before? So first up is the new XBone controller. So one of the things already, I guess this is the thing for the Xbox One nowadays, but there's no indication of what player you are, just something, little thing lights up. Or maybe I don't have any experience with the Xbox One controller setup anyway, so, but yeah. The first order of business, is the stick going to work properly? Okay, so we got Sonic there, but because of issues with Sega, I will not be doing that sort of thing on here. That will be more for the Twitch channel. So, let's do some Riptide. I already like how this thing feels in the air. It's got a little bit more weight to it. But the big thing I want to know, let's go back to that Blast Furnace track. I want to see how good the rumble is. At least the sound works right off the bat. Alright, let's do career. Probably want to turn the sound down to like 15 or so. But if it goes to 11, why do you want to turn it down to 15? I like it. Alright, let's feel some rumble here. Oh, come on. There's a track from the teaser video that I really like. Alright. Let's test these triggers! Alright. Okay, where's the rumble? Maybe I should play this with no subwoofer. So the big thing I'm noticing with this new controller is that I can feel the O-ring of the rubber part of the analog stick. I'm not so sure. I think maybe kids would do better with this one, with smaller thumbs, because well, there's a reason why the convex analog sticks on the DualShock inspired controllers are a little more popular. Now I'm feeling some rumble. Finally, that part of this game is back. I wonder if there's a way to turn up the rumble so the things shake a little more. Okay, there's got to be something running in the background, because now I got my mouse pointer showing up. These momentary stutters have to be being caused by something. And I think I know what it is. Let's mute the microphone. The Blue Yeti is still... The Blue Yeti was still hot, so I don't want to accidentally set off Cortana or anything. It's kind of like, you know, those Alexa commercials for Amazon. Oh yeah, this thing's definitely doing some rumbling. Finally, some rumble back in the game here. You know how the Alexa commercials that are on TV, they muffle the sound so that someone's Alexa thing doesn't fire off or anything? Especially when the commercial is showing that someone could say, "Alexa, order something for me." No. Maybe I should muffle things too. Or maybe I shouldn't. Alexa, how much wood could a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? Everybody who owns one of those things is typing a nasty comment right about now. Now let's see who has Google Home. Okay, Google, how much wood could a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? And of course, since my microphone is muted, hey Cortana, how much wood could a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? Alright, that's enough of that. This thing definitely rumbled a bit, though it was rather subdued. So let's change controllers and have a run through at the 360 and compare the amount of rumble, since the F310 doesn't have any of its own. 360 controller time! AKA Old Reliable. Feels more solid because it has the best build quality, overall anyways, not the best D-pad, but the best overall build quality because it's actually a first-party real console controller and not a third-party one. The D-pad may be horrendous, but the old 360 controller is definitely... It's like when Windows 95 first came out. There were articles that talked about what should I do with my Windows 3.1 machine, because prior to all those years ago, when Windows 95 first hit the scene, there were so many people using Win 3.1 that were like, what should I do? You know, what should I do with Win 3.1? Let's turn this down a bit. And crash into the wall, because I reached away from the game in order to... So despite the more plasticky analog sticks, I'm not feeling this ring digging into my thumb. So, it's a toss-up, really. I think the 360 controller might be just a hair better, unless you need the D-pad for something. In that case, forget it. Use the other one. So I'm guessing my final verdict already should be that if there's nothing else on the market, then definitely go for that Xbox One controller, although it is still a cheap knockoff third-party one. Again, very similar to the high-performance, high-frequency Mad Catz, and of course the ASCII controllers of yesteryear. Although I did try using an ASCII turbo controller once on the Super Nintendo over at a friend's house once, and I thought it was pretty decent. I had the high-frequency, high-performance, whatever it was one. I think it might have been under the Mad Catz portfolio and things like that. But I definitely, the rumble is a bit more subdued, so I probably should go find a way to turn it up or something. But it's just, the 360 controller is just way more refined. You can tell that this was the one that shipped with a console and not someone trying to cash in on things. There's more build quality in overall, and I like this whole, it lights up to tell you what player you are, but the D-pad, as we know, is absolutely atrocious. Now, just for fun, let's do this track again with the F310. This does not feel good. It's still not playing the song from the teaser trailer either. Yeah. These triggers, they feel like buttons plus plus. This does not feel good at all. But nope, no rumble. Wow. Oh man, well, look at that. Hey, I'm underwater. Oh man, didn't these analog sticks have a bit of... Yeah, they do have a bit of a problem with dead zones. I see what the people on Amazon and the rest of them, and Reddit and the rest of them, they're talking about modding these F310s. Wow. This analog stick has a big problem with dead zones. How did I used to play with these things? Was the rumble pad this bad? I don't have it anymore, I don't think. Or it's buried in a drawer somewhere, but yeah, oh man. These analog sticks have a major problem with dead zones. I can't do anywhere near the subtle movements with these things that I can with the 360 controller. Yeah, oh man. This totally calls the viability of this controller, even for legacy purposes, into question. I think I should just bust out the rumble pad when I want to go back to direct input. How did I used to play with these things, darn it? See, I can do more subtle movements with the 360 controller that are just not possible because there's a massive dead zone on these analog sticks. You have to almost completely push into the edge before it registers. The last time I had this problem was with that knockoff N64 controller that I picked up to try and experiment with third-party N64 controllers, since, you know, the sticks may have controller dust all over the place on real controllers these days, or maybe somebody who had to spin the thumbstick way too much back in the late 90s has a totally trashed N64 stick. But this is just as bad. I don't know how I used to play with these things, and hey, I didn't win first place in the race. That's because this thing sucks. Also, no force feedback rumble stuff at all. This controller does not have it. If you have one of these that does have rumble, double check the model number. It's probably the 510 that's been discontinued. Okay, now we're gonna do worst first with Leo's Fortune, because I already know that using this hat switch as a D-pad is going to be atrocious. Leo's Fortune time! Let the torture session begin. I'm using the analog sticks to select the stage. Okay. Trickery Trail. Alright, first order of business. Thumbstick. Start moving it slowly. Nothing. Nothing. Finally he moves, and now he stops. When I'm at the 1 o'clock position, he doesn't move. Same in the other direction. I see what people are talking about with the whole dead zone thing. Now, let's try this hat switch. Oh, brother. Bad flashbacks, because this thing is just as flimsy. It just feels like the thing's about to come off, you know, it feels like this thing's just going to snap off. It's like there's next to nothing holding it on here. I can technically play with this thing, but I think maybe some of the AVGN's, like, peripherals that didn't half work from his NES accessories video might work better than this. Yeah, this is... No. Just no. Change controllers now.
Epic fail.
What is this sorcery? I didn't have to back out of the game to get it to understand, or to, you know, work with this new controller. This is the Xbox One controller. I know the 360 one works pretty well for this, but I'm playing with this stick right now, and this O-ring digging into... This O-ring that's digging into my thumb. Yeah, well, I can at least know that, yeah, I can know where my thumb is relative to the center of the stick. But yeah, this O-ring digging into my thumb, I'm not so sure I prefer this for, analog games versus the 360 controller. I'm not so sure I want to keep feeling this O-ring digging into my thumb. I think even though the 360 controller is a little more plasticky, I think I prefer the plastic. Alright, switch to the D-pad, and as predicted, yeah, it does feel better. Oh, and by the way, let me show you what I'm talking about. Centered, little... Oh, look, there, see? You can do subtle movements with this thing. Maybe I should get the 360 controller, because I think that one will be the best at this. So, the thing is, I remember when the Xbox One first came out, and I was checking out an in-store model, and I tried the controller, and the controller they had, even though I think it might have been an official Xbox controller, the D-pad clicked like it was just a bunch of buttons. I might as well have been using a flight stick with a hat switch and stuff like that. But this just feels a heck of a lot better. This D-pad is awesome. The rest of the controller may not be so great, but the D-pad, this is what I should be playing retro games with. Unless I actually, you know, hack job a Nintendo controller to USB, or if there can ever be a NES Classic that doesn't cost an arm and a leg, Hey Nintendo, it's long past Christmas and you still can't find those things anywhere. Whatever. I would love to get a NES Classic controller for the authentic Nintendo feel for games like Shovel Knight. Although I do already have a Hackjob USB kit for... I already have a Hackjob USB kit for a NES controller, a real NES controller. But real NES controllers have decades on them age-wise. If anything's happened to the plastic in all these years, then you're gonna feel it. Same thing with if it's yellowed or something like that on older SNES or whatever controllers. This is the best D-pad out of all of them, by leaps and bounds. Makes no noise, it just works, and it feels... The D-pad on this thing feels more solid than the entire controller last night. Even though I just screwed that up. Oh, this is awesome. It rivals the Wii U Pro controller in terms of how good the D-pad is. This is the one to use for anything that might require the D-pad. The analog stick is kind of iffy, but maybe it'll kind of lose its edge after I break it in. But I do want to test dead zones with the 360 controller, just so I can know for certain that I'm not entirely nuts. So I think this is the end of the stage. Let's just finish this here. And let's just go back to the beginning of stage 1 with the 360 controller, coming right up. Okay, we're going back into stage 1 with the 360 controller. Now I know this is going to be in the middle as far as the experience goes. So the D-pad is kind of usable. It's not the worst thing in the world, but experience-wise and how it feels, it is kind of between the hat switch on the Logitech controller and the super solid D-pad that reminds me of controllers of yesteryear on the other one. It's usable. So the 360 controller is definitely best overall, but if the world runs out of these 360 controllers and either scalpers start gouging people for these things on the internet, or all you can get are knockoffs or worn out older versions of the 360 controller, then I think that this Xbox One controller will actually be a proper replacement for it. Alright, so now that we're out where there's a lot of nice little pretty looking plant life, and Leo's gawking at us now, let's try the dead zone test on this thing. Remember, the F310 had major dead zone problems. So let's see when he starts moving. A little. Ah! This is the most sensitive of the three. The 360 controller has... Oh, yeah, look at that. Yep. Straight, and let's see... Oh, next to no effort. I can almost keep the stick almost perfectly straight up before Leo starts moving. So, this has... The 360 controller is actually now the best controller for anything with the stick. Or any driving game or something like The Crew that I've been playing recently that requires precise movements with an analog stick. The runner-up is the Xbox One third-party controller that I just picked up today. And of course, dead last would be the F310. I think this is an indictment against these so-called PC controllers, and I think this might be why Logitech doesn't seem to be putting a lot of emphasis on those controllers anymore, because people have been plugging Xbox 360 controllers into gaming PCs for years now, and why wouldn't you? I mean, the controller has to be good enough to have shipped with one of the most successful consoles in the last 15 years. I mean, it came out in 2005, and it took how long for that thing to reach end of life? The rationale is, if it was good enough for one of the most successful consoles in the last generation, and definitely a good selling one, once they got over the whole Red Ring of Death thing, then of course it's going to be a decent PC controller. And that's basically what people are doing with, even if they're not building a so-called console killer computer, when people do PC gaming like this, they want a controller that is on par with the consoles, because that's basically what they're doing, is using a computer that happens to be sitting around as a gaming console. So yeah, I'm playing with the stick, and while it feels like the Xbox One controller might have been a waste of money, I would probably make the returns people at the local Walmart furious if I showed up with it tomorrow and I don't want this one either. They'd probably think I was one of those, folks who practically rents merchandise or something. So, I kept the Retro Duo controllers around with the old Retro Duo, even though they're blatantly inferior for challenge mode or something, or maybe, for personal preference or to switch things up, I might use one of those. But yeah, the most sensitive analog sticks are. You know what? I think this is a Twitch video waiting to happen, because now I got to take a driving game the Crew. The car physics in The Crew Here. Yike. Nope. Okay, I'm dead. Yeah, I guess I should be quicker and not go so crazy with the live commentary here, but the car physics in the crew are very, very heavy. It feels like the car basically weighs a ton, so sensitive analog sticks will be very handy for trying to drive around those cities and pull off hairpin turns and things like that. So I think that's a Twitch video waiting to happen. You know, I've already been planning on, you know, like Tuxedo versus this game at this setting, Monolith at this game versus this setting, but I think I want to do the game versus the controller too as well. Well, it gives me some ideas for some gaming content to put over on Twitch that would of course get me out of this camcorder Let's Play mode. Alright, let's shut down this old thing and let's wrap things up here. Okay, time for some final words on all of this. Now, I actually did a video back in 2014 in Season 1 about the futility of the world of game controllers and how all these hardware manufacturers make you buy the same stuff over and over again. I just watched it again, and you know what? My points from 2014 are just as valid today as they were back then. This really is an ongoing, perennial problem, and it's a total disaster. One correction, though. The spoof article that made fun of this incremental buying your controllers all over again was actually from Dorkly rather than Gawker. So, the final word on the $30 Xbox One controller is that it does have its pluses. The build quality's not quite there, but the D-pad blows away the one on the 360 by leaps and bounds. But it is definitely still a third-party controller, and it has all the feeling of those old third-party controllers from when I was growing up that were just, they had no weight to them, they weren't solid, they were just awful. So, approaching McDonald's toy territory in terms of cheap chunk of plastic. Fortunately, this specific one has the good stuff where it counts. The thumbsticks are rubber, the D-pad is okay, the buttons are passable. The triggers aren't too horrible, and there's some rumble in it as well, but it feels cheap, because it is cheap. However, you actually have a nice solid cord as opposed to a flimsy micro USB that would break if you ever accidentally did this to the cable, which is unfortunately a feature of the Xbox One controller, which will set you back anywhere from $50 to $80. Yeah, the custom version, I just looked on Microsoft's site, $80 for a controller? The me from the 1990s would have flipped at the possibility of an $80 controller. Of course, I grew up with $50 games, so you think about it. You think about it for a second there. $80 controller when I grew up with $50 games. Yeah, that would not have been a good thing. I also did find my old rumble pad as well as the, what was this thing called again? The dual action. I did find my old controllers from the pre-X input days, but unfortunately the one with the rumble didn't work with Leo's Fortune, so I wasn't able to really test out the dead zone issues like I did with the F310, which, yeah, as you can tell, I didn't even bother bringing over here because, yeah, it's going to be relegated to compatible. Well, in terms of direct input, I think I'd be better off with this thing if I ever had a game that needed direct input ever again. This thing has no rumble. This is the forerunner to the F310, and their PlayStation 2 era as well, so they have buttons instead of analog triggers. So, but at least this one had some rumble, even if this was square and that was square, and just a mess. I don't know how the dead zones are on those things, 'cause I haven't used them in so long, but there's next to no reason to use these things anymore. I mean, Steam, I think, has a way of making a backward compatibling. I almost made that into a verb. Steam has a way, I think, of hooking up X input controllers to mimic the old direct input controllers of years gone by, but I haven't needed it yet. That's the thing. So I'm being prepared for something that hasn't happened in years and years and years since I just started buying 360 controllers after finally caving after years of insisting on PC controllers because I was an idiot that didn't know just how Microsoft had made these things so PC friendly. And now this thing picks up where those left off. However, other than the D-pad, I think these controllers are worth seeking out to the ends of the earth until their production is finally halted. I think they actually can still be found on the Microsoft webpage as, you know, available for purchase new. So I think Microsoft might even still be making them, even though the 360's gone, because they've got probably one of the best PC controllers in the last 15 years, if you don't mind a wire. Because otherwise, you're stuck with stuff like this. I don't know if you can use the 360 controller with an Xbox One. I mean, it does seem to have very similar buttons, but in terms of the PC side of things, I still think if you had to buy anything that's on this desk right now, or table, you should definitely find a 360 controller, because this still remains, to this day, the best overall out of everything that's over here. It's X input, it does the job, it feels good while it's, controlling your game for you. You don't have massive dead zones on the analog sticks. You don't have what feels like an O-ring digging into your thumb like you do with this thing. I think the Xbox One kind of takes the edges off of these a bit, but it is good to know where my thumb is over the stick, but I've never needed to feel like an O-ring was digging into my thumb that much. This thing is usable, but it occupies the same place in my hardware collection as that old turbo controller from the old high-performance turbo controller. Cheap. Play with it from time to time to mix things up, but for the most part, I should be looking for 2 more of these for 4-player games, because this is the controller that you give your friend that either thinks they're better than you or that you can't stand or whatever. And I remember some people playing with super pads with the N64 way back when. Yeah, no. And I still say what I said last night about parents who think they're smart by spending I spent $5 to $10 on a third-party controller for my kid's gaming system. No, you're just cheap. And when this thing breaks and these don't, you'll learn that, hey, these are both $30 controllers. But if you put a gun to my head and said buy one, it would definitely be this one, even though the D-pad is not as good. So, it really is something what the controller world has sunk to. And then you have this thing. $50 just so you can have a normal controller on the Wii U, and there aren't even triggers on the back. There's triggers that are digital and act like buttons. And, again, flimsy little USB that'll eventually break from plugging and unplugging too many times. For those of you that are wondering why I have the charging cord duct taped to my Blue Yeti, I already sent it out for service once because the USB jack died. At least it was still under warranty back then. Hey, but at least it has a headphone jack, but so does this. I don't think that's the standard size. I think it's a size a little bit smaller because it's the old Xbox headset and whatnot. But yeah, if you're going to be PC gaming, you want to search for these to the ends of the earth. Don't get one of these until you absolutely cannot find one of these anywhere anymore. And, of course, as usual, make sure it has the little thing at the end that goes to USB. Really, Microsoft should keep these things in production. They're hands down, years later, ever since I first heard of the idea of having a 360 controller on your computer, these things are, hands down, one of the best, if not the best, controllers for PC gaming on the market still. The console, the Xbox 360, may be in the rearview mirror, but if you don't want to worry about rechargeable batteries and deteriorating service life, or accidentally destroying the itty-bitty USB port because you accidentally brought down your hand on the cable, or it dangled by the cable a few too many times or something like that, if you want the simplicity of a wired controller with 9 feet of cable that can be extended to 16 feet over USB, this is what you'd still want to get. Even though we are very squarely in the Xbox One era, the only controllers like this that you can get for the Xbox One and Windows are knockoffs. So, still the king, but I'm not bringing this one back. I'll keep it around to see if it grows on me. Fat chance of that happening. But, never say never. I mean, we did just see that with the Patriots versus the Falcons, but I don't want to rub that in too much. Righto. These are still what you want to get, but if you feel like being adventurous, maybe. Till next time, this is MultimediaJay, signing off. Thanks for stopping by.